Bloomberg Tech Asia is live with Shery Ahn in Tokyo and Annabelle Drulers in Hong Kong.
We're focusing today on the push to use regulation to protect young people from potential harms posed by social media. Australia has become the trailblazer for curbing youth access to digital platforms, treating the issue like alcohol or cigarettes. And it's an idea that's been gaining traction in other countries too.
Social media giants are facing a reckoning as moves to curb its negative impact, especially on children, gain momentum around the world. In the US, Meta is facing mounting legal challenges over allegations that its social media platforms were created to be addictive. After a Los Angeles jury found Meta and Google negligent in the design and operation of their popular platforms in March, more US states are now discussing ways to limit young people on social media. Australia is leading the global push on that front. Last year, it forced social media giants, including Meta, TikTok, Snap, and X, to keep users under 16 off their platforms.
The global community who are looking at Australia and saying, well, if Australia can do it, why can't we? It's a profound reform which will continue to reverberate around the world.
The Indonesian government has also initiated regulations aimed at removing under 16s from social media platforms. Greece will be doing something similar by the start of next year. In Southeast Asia, the Philippines and Malaysia appear to be the most active in considering similar measures to Indonesia's ban. And the movement is gaining global traction as more countries debate similar measures. The fate of the Australian experiment will provide important information to governments seeking to regulate social media. It's already encountering substantial implementation hurdles. Major tech platforms are under investigation for non-compliance, and reports say the restrictions are relatively easy for children to get around. There's also plenty of legal hurdles. Courts have rejected suits that targeted platforms for the content posted by users, but proponents of regulation have proven in court that it's the algorithm that's addictive and causes harm. And then there's concerns about impeding on constitutional guarantees on free speech.
And I presume that at some point there's also going to be European momentum, but we want to make sure that whatever we do is legally tight and can be implemented.
But beyond legal debates, there's the sociological one. Will such limits actually change behaviour or just reshuffle the issues? Paul Allen, Bloomberg.
One of the countries discussing a ban is the Philippines. Senator Win Gatchalian is one of the lawmakers leading that push, and he joins us now from Manila. Senator, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg Tech Asia. First of all, tell us why you think that your country needs these sorts of restrictions on social media.
Well, recently we've been seeing a lot of cases of self-harm and also attempted suicide. And there's also a lot of discussion on the effects of social media to mental health, particularly leading to self-harm and also to attempted suicide. And also, whenever I talk to parents, and these are all anecdotes, but whenever I talk to parents, parents see also a lot of inactivity, meaning their kids are not playing with other kids, their kids are not going out to the parks anymore. A lot of them are just glued to their cell phone. So there's also public push to ban social media and also to regulate cell phone use among minors.
Big tech, though, will tell you that they already have strong safeguards for young people. So why are more restrictions needed? And what sort of restrictions are you pushing for? Are we talking about something similar to outright bans that we have seen in Australia, for example, or perhaps parental supervision like we've seen in the likes of Brazil or Portugal?
Well, social media will always say whatever that's beneficial to them. So that's given already. But at least in my case, I filed a bill to ban social media for children aged 16 and below. And my case is children should be playing with other children. Children should be going out to parks, going out to the playground. They should also have social interaction with other kids. What social media created is addiction to their platforms, and a lot of kids spend a lot of time now. On the average, I'm looking at the data right now. On the average, children age 16 and below spend about 5 to 6 hours a day here in the Philippines on their cell phones, most particularly social media. So in other words, children are not socializing anymore. They spend 6 hours a day on their cell phones, morning and also at night. And this is also a problem when they spend a lot of time at night, because instead of sleeping and resting, they doom scrolling now, and that also deprives them of sleep.
But Senator, young people will actually say it's not just doom scrolling, it's not just being online, it's actually connecting with other people as well, that gives them emotional support. And also others worry about perhaps marginalized youth, LGBTQ+, people who cannot express themselves, disabled people who cannot leave their homes. Is this a risk?
Well, children can socialize physically with other children. And this probably will be an argument that we hear many, many times, especially with people like in my age, that during our time, we socialize with other kids physically. We play with other kids, we hang out with other kids, and we interact with other kids. That physical interaction is more stronger. The bond you develop is more stronger than compared to a digital platform. And other than social interaction, it's the physical activity. Children play in playgrounds. They also play with one another. So that's also very important, because that creates a healthy lifestyle for them. Now, in terms of expression, there's so many ways to expressing yourself. You can express it in your community. You can also express it through in your school. So these are there's no limitation to expressing yourself.
So aside from the harms and the benefits of social media, how are you looking at the possibility that, let's say, a social media ban is passed? What does that mean in terms of freedom of speech in your country and the constitutionality of it? Do you expect the courts to side with such a ban, or is there a risk that they might shoot it down?
Well, freedom of speech also have limitations, and we can prove very clearly that social media is also creating a lot of mental health issues, and these mental health issues is detrimental to our youth and to the future of this nation. So, in other words, children can still express themselves through other means and other fora, but we need to make sure that their well-being is also protected, and we have to make sure that they are brought up and their well-being is not affected negatively by social media and also the algorithms that they are exposed to.
Win Gatchalian, he's a Philippine senator. Thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts today. We'll continue this conversation coming up. Do age-based bans really protect young users or simply create new risks? We'll put that question to social psychologist and former Facebook staffer Ravi Iyer next. This is Bloomberg Tech Asia. Governments around the world are weighing limits on teenagers' access to social media as concerns grow about mental health and screen addiction. While countries are taking different approaches, the core question is the same. Do age-based bans actually protect young people or risk unintended consequences? To unpack all of this, we're joined by Ravi Iyer, Managing Director of the USC Marshall School's Neely Center. He's a social psychologist who previously spent over 4 years leading research and product teams at Facebook, working on mitigating the societal impact of online platforms. And he's also contributed to Jonathan Haidt's best-selling book, The Anxious Generation, about social media's impact on young people. Ravi, really great to have you on the show. So unpack for us, first of all, this idea right now that seems to be spreading around the world, that social media harms youth.
Yeah, so I think this is a fairly easy idea to grasp. I've heard the previous person on the program. And so, many of us are old enough to remember when kids hung out and they talk to each other, and then we all see them on their phones instead of talking to each other. And so they're just not getting the in-person socialization that they need to. It's displacing other activities. So 45% of kids in the United States say that it displaces their sleep. 40%, I believe, say that it displaces their activities at school. There was one study that kids were using phones 90 minutes at school, oftentimes on social media. So it's displacing a lot of other activities. There are also these acute effects. So I remember the previous person talked about self-harm. The people are seeing content they're not ready for. They're also being contacted by strangers who they're not ready for. Like most of us probably have gotten messages from a stranger purporting to be maybe someone who wants to give us a financial opportunity, maybe someone who wants to, be romantically attached. We understand that that's not real, that we have to ignore those messages, but kids are not sophisticated enough to necessarily understand that. And so there's, for a variety of reasons, these products are not, they're not meant for kids. And so people are responding appropriately to reduce access for kids to these products.
But really, equating social media to, say, alcohol or just an addiction like it comes with smoking, for example, is that not too extreme? How do you view the idea that these products are as addictive as those chemically, physically altering products?
So I'm not an expert in addiction, but what I will say, I'm a social psychologist, but what I'll say is that 45% of kids in the U.S. will say that they use these products too much. And so some part of addiction is, one, using these things more than you want to, right? So this is not adults telling kids that they are using it too much. These are kids themselves saying, I'm using these products too much. There was a study in the U.S. where 70% of kids said they felt manipulated by these products. So they're using these things too much. They're regretting some of their usage. Not everyone, but many kids are regretting their usage. And they're using it despite knowledge of the negative impacts it's having on them, right? So again, many of these kids are saying it's negatively impacting their sleep. It's negatively impacting their studies. They know that. And so, and again, it's not all kids, but there's a large number of kids, right? So there's 40 million kids in the US. Half of them are on Instagram. If 45% of them are saying that it's impacting their sleep, well, that's, you can do the math. That's millions of kids.
Big Tech says that they're actually putting safeguards against all of that. How do you respond to that?
I mean, not many people use these safeguards, right? So these are parental controls. People have done studies on these safeguards. The numbers as far as like the experiences that people are having haven't really gone down. People test these safeguards. They don't work as well as they should. They're not well maintained. They're not used, right? Parents are busy. They're not looking for, how do I use the safeguards on, the 12 products that my kid is using? They need someone to help them. And that's why these laws are popular all around the world, because parents need help. They're tired of fighting with their kids about cell phones and social media, and they want someone, parents have an option. They can either isolate their kid, or they can have them exposed to all these products. And it's just, there's no win situation. So what parents need is help from their governments, and governments are giving them that.
We have seen Australia, of course, take the lead here, but at the same time, some of the shortfalls around what they're trying to do, loopholes with teenagers, just getting around the bans. What is the right way to regulate and help parents, help teenagers that, as you said, might now feel that they're on social media too much?
Yeah. So I think Australia's law is going great. And so you can look at it as glass half empty or glass half full, right? So there was a report that Snapchat usage dropped from 34% to roughly 20%. So it lost, roughly 40% of its audience. And so, that's 14% of kids. It's, I think roughly 120,000 kids who are no longer being subject to, unwanted sexual content, advances from strangers. They no longer have Snapchat streaks where they're like feeling like I have to get on and talk to my friend, not because I want to, because I have to keep this streak up, right? So there's a lot of benefits for those kids. And there's an article, there's a poll by YouGov, 43% of kids in Australia, parents in Australia are noticing that their kids are having more in-person social interactions. And there's another article where people who are running phishing programs were noticing that a boom in phishing, and they were attributing it to the social media ban. So for many kids, it's actually working out really well. Now, yes, there are some kids who are still getting around the protections, and they're getting on these products. But just because it isn't working for every kid doesn't mean it's not helping a lot of kids. And these will get better, right? Age verification is getting better. The norms are changing. So when today's 11-year-olds are 15, those numbers will go down further still. And when today's 9-year-olds are 15, it'll be further down even more.
But then I guess at the same time, you have to think about the extent of the restrictions, right? You're talking about outright bans, especially in the case of Australia. But what about other cases like parental supervision, more oversight, like they're trying to do in Brazil and Portugal as well, especially if you're thinking that perhaps just an outright ban on social media could lead children to go to darker corners of the internet, not to mention that it could marginalize some parts of youth that are more vulnerable.
Yeah, well, let me just correct something. A lot of people call it a ban, but if you're in Australia and you're under 16, you still can go watch whatever you want on YouTube. You can go onto TikTok and search for your favorite dance video. You just can't do it without an account, without the inappropriate business relationship between a company and a platform, right? So it is not something which restricts content. Now, and it also doesn't restrict the internet. Like, there are lots of places on the internet that you can connect with other people. They don't have, for example, Snapchat streaks, which sort of gamifies your interactions. You actually interact with people, not because you're trying to keep up some metric, but because you actually want to talk to them, right? So there's lots of ways you can interact with people in person on the internet, that you can watch content. And so I don't call it ban. I usually call it an age limit, because you can go in Australia under 16 and go watch whatever you want on the internet. So I actually think it's a perfectly appropriate policy. I know that some people have, some places have talked about parental control. I think parents need help. Like, they don't want to be the bad guy. They want somebody else to say, like, look, you can't be doing this, because otherwise, if other parents don't enforce it on their kids, then you're back into that same problem where, like, you're the one person trying to isolate your kid, everybody else is on it.
So let's talk about that point on gamifying interactions, because what we're seeing in California, for example, with the lawsuit, is really about addiction and how these platforms have been designed to keep the youth engaged and really trying to continue to get their attention. Is this a new way of looking at product liability that could actually spread across the U.S.?
100%. I mean, I think it's a very appropriate way to look at. I mean, in the United States, we very appropriately have a strong free speech tradition, but companies are not speaking when they optimize an algorithm for as long as they can get you to use it, right? Or when they gamify how many days in a row you've talked to your friends, right? Like that, there's no idea they're trying to express in those ways, right? So the idea that this was covered by speech or free speech is just not. It's not what the First Amendment in the United States was intended for. So we're very appropriately seeing courts realize, like, this isn't speech. This is more akin to a law saying that, you can't play your radio at 3 a.m. outside of your neighbor's house, right? It has something to do with speech, but it is not about speech. It's about the way that we let people interact with our kids.
Ravi Iyer, really great to get your insights. He's the managing director, USC Marshall School's Neely Center. And coming up on Bloomberg Tech Asia, keeping kids safe online could require more than just age bans. We'll look at what actually reduces harm on social platforms next. Big tech companies have spent years insisting that the connection between social media and mental health harm is unproven. But Bloomberg opinion columnist Catherine Thorbecke thinks that while Australia's approach has loopholes, the move has at least started a global debate on how to solve a very complex problem. She joins us now here in the Tokyo studio. Catherine, and you're actually rooting for the ban, but there are issues still with the ban.
That's right, Shery. So I think it's really optimistic to believe that hardline age limits will really keep young people off of these platforms if they want to go on. I think about sort of when I was growing up on the early internet, which was really a lawless land, I was a lot more tech savvy than my parents. And I think we're still seeing that now. And I think, putting aside the enforcement debate, which I still think is important when you're designing regulation and policy, but even if you put aside whether this is enforceable or not, I think my main issue with age limits is really that they don't address sort of the root cause of the harms. And I think that's, the algorithms, that's platform design, that's these features that keep us endlessly sort of scrolling. And I think policymakers should really be sort of focusing their attention on that. And, I think that it's not really somebody's birthday that will make these platforms safe. It's really these product design features and these algorithms that policymakers should really be focusing on.
Do you think there's enough focus now, at least with the understanding that perhaps it could equate to addiction in the form of smoking or alcohol, for example?
So I think if there were ever a time for policymakers and global regulators to really take this on, it would be now. I think we're seeing, as you sort of mentioned in the U.S., these sort of big tobacco moment, as they're calling it. So we're really seeing global momentum. And on top of that, around the world, people are really starting to focus on these age limits and these teen bans on social media. So I think we have all the momentum now. And if we really want to sort of strike now, we need jurisdictions to work together and really keep this pressure on big tech companies.
That's the issue, though, right? Is really around the world. And there are so many jurisdictions. How complex will the situation get for big tech?
I think it will definitely get big. But I think, as I mentioned, now is really the moment, I think, when we can really actually see change. And we haven't really seen comprehensive online child safety regulation, I'd say, at all, or at least in the past decade. And I think, with the big pressure that's on big tech companies, at home in the U.S. with these lawsuits and with sort of the global momentum for these age limits, I think now's the time for really big tech to sort of come up with solutions if they want to actually keep, young users.
Are there any lessons to be taken from the instances of Australia or from other jurisdictions that are trying new things?
Definitely. I think Australia, I was really skeptical of the bans at first, but I think they've really started this global conversation. And I think we've really seen, other jurisdictions say, if Australia is doing it, then we can do it too. And I think that's what it will really take for actual change to happen. I think it can't just be one jurisdiction. It has to be all of them sort of working together and putting this pressure on big tech at the same time.
How much is it also the job of parents?
I think it takes a village. So I think, parents have a role to play here, but I think they're also, exhausted. And I think, sort of conversely, I think parents are at this point just as addicted to their smartphones as kids. So I think the onus should really be on the tech companies to sort of crack down on these algorithms and sort of put policies in place that will, actually keep kids safe online.
They've already said they've put strong safeguards.
Mm-hmm. I think they can do a lot more. I think that when you look at sort of the algorithms that drive content on social media platforms, it's usually sort of the most, the stuff that sort of is elevated to the top of your news feed is usually the stuff that will make you the most outraged, make you the most engaged. And on top of that, they're designed to sort of keep you endlessly scrolling. So I think that there are little things that they can do like that will actually make a big difference in terms of, protecting young users and protecting all users.
Yeah, doom scrolling, rage bait as well.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine Thorbecke, really great to get your insights. Of course, you can check her columns at Bloomberg Opinion Columnist, and everything is on the terminal when it comes to those articles on really the potential harm that social media can really put on young people. That's it for this episode of Bloomberg Tech Asia. Join us next month for more, and you can check out, of course, our past episodes and more from our tech coverage on the Bloomberg Video Hub. This is Bloomberg.